Awesome. We're live. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing okay. We are live. My name is Shreya, and I am a developer advocate at Courier and also the founder of Bit Project. John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm John Kilmister, and I'm a software engineer and architect. I've been working in Azure for many years, and did Bit Project last year, and glad to be joining again this year.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you. John was a one-on-one mentor last year, and you are not only mentoring students this year, but you're also mentoring our team, and you've been doing a lot of just like helping students out like across the board. I'm really excited about this specific workshop because it's less of a workshop, more of just like a general talk about what personal branding means for an engineer and just in tech in general. I know there's like a lot of different platforms and tools that are available out there. And especially for someone that is going into tech with very few connections or just very little experience, it can be pretty daunting to look at all these tools and like figure out where to start. So I guess my first question before we actually dive into the specifics is what are all of the tools in general that are available to engineers that you should have on the top of your mind when you're starting your branding journey?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting kind of concept, I guess, personal branding. And it's something that when I started my career, it wasn't something I was aware of. I kind of left university and it was a bit like, okay, I now need to find a job. How do I even, start that process? And branding wasn't really something that I initially thought of. Social media has obviously come on a long way in the last sort of 20 years. So we are in a different landscape now. But it is something that I've thought more about as I've gone on through my career. And really the purpose of it is to show everyone your best side, really. Yes, it used to be the case that you had a resume and a CV and that's where it ended. But now, companies will Google your name, when you get an application in to see what kind of profile you have. But it's also an opportunity to say a lot more about what you can do and what your interests are. There's only so much space on a resume or a CV to get the message across. And if we look at things like GitHub, which we'll look at in a bit, people can actually look at your code and actually get a sample of what you do, which is something that you can't get across in a 1 or a 2 page resume. So as far as tools are concerned for this, there are a number. I mean, there are the social media networks. So LinkedIn being the main one for kind of putting your profile out there of your experience and your kind of skills, and also about building up a network of people through that. And we'll come back and talk about LinkedIn probably more. Then you've got things like Twitter, which might not seem like an obvious place to kind of promote yourself, especially when you might not feel that you've got anything to say, but it is actually a really good resource, and especially in the technology sphere. And then we've got GitHub, and GitHub is a great place to showcase your code. And we can also extend that and start putting in to our GitHub profile richer information. It doesn't just have to be about the code that you've committed. You can link out to other areas and bits and pieces. And then there's other areas that you might already have online, but you don't realize that you can utilize them in other ways, such as your Stack Overflow profile or another public forum. Asking questions might seem like something that you don't necessarily want to shout about, but on the contrary, when you're a new engineer, it shows that you've got that appetite to learn, to better yourself. And especially when those questions are structured in a really strong way, it can show that you know how to go and find information out yourself. So your Stack Overflow profile can actually be a real asset in your sort of branding. And then finally, there is blogs and your own potentially website or portfolio. Now, I didn't have one of those for most of my career, and it's definitely not an issue if you don't. But again, it just adds another string to the bow, so to speak, and gives another place for people to get an idea of what you're all about.
That's a lot of really good resources. And honestly, until this conversation, I didn't even realize that all of these different things kind of like combine into your like entire online presence and, you know, personal brand and tech. I feel like when you're applying to jobs, especially when it's your first time doing it, all you think is, oh, they have my LinkedIn, they have my resume. That's all they're going to look at. But there's so much more to it than, you know, your entire online footprint. Um, so where do you start? What is like the right place to start?
That is a really good question. I think at this point in your career, if it's the first job that you're going for, it's a slightly different point than if you've been working for a little while. If you are in a situation where you've been working for a little while and you're thinking of changing from one job to another, what I would say is don't wait until you need to change job. Kind of get ahead of the curve a little bit and build the branding, your personal branding, over a period of time. And that's something that I kind of fell into, I'd say, the first time I changed jobs. I got very frustrated at the particular company I was at and kind of burnt out, I guess, to a point. And then I didn't have the energy to do to do that promotion. Also, building a network of people isn't something that you can do over a very short period of time. That's something that builds up over a long period. But I guess we're talking here mainly about people who are coming straight out of college, university, and looking to enter the market for the first time. So I would say leverage what you've already got in place. So if you have been contributing to GitHub, then make more of your GitHub profile. If you're starting on a completely blank page, well, it's probably good to spruce up your LinkedIn profile, because you can put into your LinkedIn profile your skills and the skills and your work experience. That doesn't take a lot of extra effort to do that. It's information you've already got. You know where you've previously worked. You know the skills that you're working on. And LinkedIn is much like an extension of your CV, but it does allow you to start also building out a network and also start looking for jobs, as it's one of the many places where you can look for jobs.
Definitely. So let's say that we've started with our LinkedIn or whichever platform you choose to use. Is there like a balance or a sweet spot between having multiple different platforms? Should you really have a presence on all of them and focus on one? Like, what is the right way to go about doing that?
So it's going to be different for everybody. I think there's a lot with all of what we're talking about today. Everyone's going to have a different approach and work with, different things. I personally use each platform for different purposes. So on Twitter, I do follow a lot of other people in the tech industry, and I often pick up lots of useful advice and tips, conferences that are going on, someone else mentions, and I learn about it and I go to it. However, that's had a side effect of having a networking effect. And that's then when I wanted to start putting my profile on there, so that people that saw, okay, I follow these people, then they start looking at my profile and I can start building a little bit of a following on there. LinkedIn is probably the one that when I'm searching for a job that I really focus on. When I've looked over CVs in the past, and I've done that many times for lots of different roles, I've hired many different engineers. You typically either have an open call for CVs that you get in and you have a lot to work through, or you work with a recruitment agency that's filtering them down, or a HR department that's filtering them down. But I'll always receive at least 10, 15 CVs in one go. So I'm in the UK, so I'm working with CVs rather than resumes, but it's a similar process, I believe. So I've got to get through them pretty quickly. I'm not going to go and check everyone's LinkedIn profile or Twitter account or personal blog. I'm going to look through that CV, shortlist them, and it's at that point that I want to then start looking at the broader picture. And I want it to be as easy for me as possible. If you've got a presence on so many different platforms, then that's not overly useful. That said, you can, as I said, use your LinkedIn profile to submit as a job application rather than a full resume or CV. So it is worth having that one up to date. Also, if people don't have a presence marked out on their CV or resume, LinkedIn is a good place to start looking. If you want to know a bit more about them and see the other skills they've got or recommendations and various other bits and pieces. Blogging and other profiles are a bit more about building your overall brand of I'm an expert in this area, or I've got an interest in that area. I say expert, actually, you don't really, there's always information that you have that someone else doesn't. Even if you're learning, you might be able to write about I've decided I'm going to learn this new language. How did I find the resources to learn that language? And that might be a question that someone else has. And if you write about it, you can start to build a portfolio of blog posts and articles. Now, not everybody's got time to do that, but don't feel that you're not writing down or sharing your content because you don't have the experience, or everybody's got something they can share. So yeah, if it is something that interests you, definitely go for it. And it can build that bigger picture of what you're looking for.
Awesome. I completely agree with that. I do want to start zooming into GitHub specifically, because that's something that you've mentioned, but it is also something that, at least at the student level, can be a little overlooked compared to things like LinkedIn and resumes. So we'll get to those in a bit as well. I do want to remind you, our producer Beatrix has linked a Slido where you can go ahead and ask questions in the audience. And you can also vote on other people's questions to figure out what the priorities are. But if you leave questions in the Discord or in the Slido, we'll try to get to them as quickly as possible. But yeah, going back to GitHub, what is it about GitHub? Actually, yeah, go ahead and screen share it. I'll just let you take it away, John. I know you have a lot of thoughts on this.
No, it's great. So I think we all know that, or everyone listening into this should know that GitHub is the place that we're storing our code for our projects, or for our Bit project. But we can also create our own repos for our own projects. And that's a really good practice just to get into. If you're just practicing with something, making sure you push it up to Git, make sure that it's saved, has a backup copy, but it also gets you into that really good practice, because any company you join, any software engineering company, will be using Git. Maybe not GitHub, but Git. And it's just a really good practice to get into. So if we have a look, here is my profile here. Now, we'll come back to this front page, and this is what we want to focus on. But if we just look at, if we just go to, I'm just going to go to another. So I'm just trying to think of, we'll just go to someone else. So actually, we'll just click on this random person here. So I'm just in a random repo. I'm just going to pick on a random person. Oh, right. Sorry, not that person. Just thinking someone. Well, I'm just going to choose a random person. Here we go. So yeah, this is what a profile that's had nothing done to it looks like. So you have the default picture, you have your name, and you have your kind of history of where you've committed, plus any repos that you've committed on as well. So that's how it looks out of the box if I was to kind of just go to that. But we can do an awful lot to make it more appealing. First thing to note, actually, while we're on here, this contributions graph, it's something that has a lot of talk about in the general community, in developer community. It shouldn't necessarily be looked on badly if you don't have many commits in this graph. Firstly, not everybody has time to commit to projects outside their work, using other platforms and other things. So definitely, I always kind of don't look at this as a kind of recruiting metric, so to speak, but it is something just to kind of be aware of, that sometimes people do look at this. But I would definitely advise against that, because there's so many different reasons. So we can put that to one side at the moment, and we can actually look at how we can improve this overall profile. The first thing is to select a picture. Now, ideally, that would be a picture of you if you're trying to form a sort of personal brand, but it doesn't have to be. You can see with my blog here, I've got a little logo that I created, and I try and carry that across all of my profiles when I don't use a personal picture. So, and you can see again with Bit Project, you've got your logo that you carry across. But having something there rather than the default thing definitely brings it out a little bit. And then we've got the description. This person hasn't got a description. If we go back to my profile, you can see here I've got my picture, followed by my name, and then we've got a very short sort of introduction about me. This is something that I would recommend you think about across all of your social platforms, and actually including your resume and CV. Try and think of kind of that elevator pitch. What are you trying? Who are you, and what are you trying to do? So it might be that you're a recent graduate looking to start in React, or looking to further my career in a JavaScript framework, or you might choose one of the backend frameworks. But having a bit of a focus really helps people understand what you're about. And that can be quite hard early on in your career, working out which direction to go. But having a consistent message that you're trying to do this is really important, and being consistent. I'm not necessarily using the same text everywhere, but I'm trying to be consistent. So we've got that. We can also link off to our other profiles as well, be that your own website or your Twitter account or whatever. So if we actually look at my the profile, so you can see here I've got a bit of a fancier page which gets put in above my graph and my pinned repositories. So the pinned repositories, by the way, you can take any of the repositories that you work with and you can just mark them as pinned, and then they will appear here. So if you've done a lot of little samples that you're not particularly wanting to promote, that's fine. You can make them private, hide them away. But anything public that you do want to promote, you can come in and you can pin them here. So these are quite old now, but these are some a JavaScript game competition I entered a long time ago, and a more recent code sample. So going back to this here, this README. So this is just a text file. What you need to do in order for it to appear here is you need to create a new Git repository with the same name as your GitHub account. So I've got blue boxes here, and you see blue boxes there. And if we go to that Git repo, you can see it just has a README file in there and a single image. So it's just a new repo, make it the same name as your username, and then put a README file in, and then that appears at the top of your page if anyone just goes there. The next step is to make it a bit more fun, interactive, and put some more information on it. Now, as I say, this is just a markdown page. You might think, well, how did we get all of these various bits and pieces? Well, on anybody's README, you can click the little pencil icon and see it. So you can see this has an image. That's just markdown for an image. And then we've got a whole set of links here. These are actually using something called Shields.io, which is a website in which you can build badges. So just jump across here. So we can build various badges, you can see, and they're all built using query strings. And you can see the different styles and things like that. But the best way of actually using this is, if we go back, is you can just copy this from here or another repo and then modify it with your personal details in there. And we can see there's links out to websites and various bits and pieces. We've then just got some basic HTML that is linking off here to something called Git README stats. And again, you can take this and just modify the username and bits and pieces. And the technologies and tools, again, it's just the Shields.io. And then there's a random quotes block. Now, how did I learn about all of this, and how did I work out how to make it look like this? Well, I didn't do this on my own. There's a really good Git repo called Awesome GitHub Profile Pages. It explains the process It also links to a lot of other repos. So we can go to any of these. We can see how those people's profiles look. We can see here, this person's got some images and some links out, and even a block of code that kind of describes what they do to make it a bit more fun. And then we can click on the README and we can go in and we can see, if we click pencil again, we'll then be able to see what they've actually used. So this, if we go back to the overall list, and we can share the link with this, that is the purpose of this repo, is really to link out to other people's READMEs that that you can get inspired from and create an awesome looking README that will appear at the top of your profile. So anyone that visits it gets to see it.
Awesome. Would you mind actually sharing the link to that awesome GitHub README page?
Yeah.
Actually, I think Beatrix just sent it already, so we're good there. I did have a couple of follow-up questions from the students. So one of them was, should we show all of the projects that we've done before, or are we just trying to focus on one or two that are like the main ones that we've worked on?
I think with any recruitment process, as a person hiring, you've got a lot of things to look for, a lot of CVs and things like that. So you want to make it as easy as possible for them. So I would focus just on a couple of key ones that you feel really showcase what you're looking for. So if you're looking for a React job and you've done a React sample, that's the one you're going to want to highlight. I'd also link to those individual repos from your LinkedIn profile as well.
Definitely. And then do we need to add descriptions to every single README for the projects? And like what value does that bring?
So the README on a Git on a project, it can serve many purposes. I think having a well-structured README just on any project is really important. Even if it just says, this is what the code is, and this is how to use it. So it's not necessarily a breakdown of everything you did, lessons learned, and things like that. Although that can add some benefit, especially if you're trying to promote that and say, look, this is something that I've done as a project. But even if it's just the code that you'll find here was a prototype that I put together, and to run it, you run this one command. Just put a bit of context behind it, because if you spent weeks and weeks polishing something, that's quite different than if you created a prototype. And as an external person viewing it, that information is really useful to me because I can get a bit of context and I say, well, oh, okay, it was your first project and there are some things in it that I would have done differently, but there's a bit of context with it.
Yeah. I do also want to add, I know that we've spoken a little bit about how like UK resumes and CV standards are different to American ones.
Yeah.
In my experience with American resumes specifically, it is, best practice to keep it as short as possible, especially in your early years. People don't want to see anything longer than a single page. And if you are someone that does develop a lot of projects on the side and you want to show that, hey, look, I have all these skills that I've built up over the years, or all these cool projects that I've worked on, that is really important. But you might not necessarily have the space, like the physical, space on your page of resume to talk about all of these really cool projects that you have. So having like this really easy to look at, easy to navigate GitHub profile with your, pinned projects, with the main ones that you want your recruiters to look at, makes it so much easier, right? It's almost like going up to a person and being like, here's 1, 2, 3 of what I want you to look at, as opposed to here's like a whole box of information and having them kind of sort through and figure out what's important.
Yeah, exactly. I would probably only put a single, well, on your CV or resume, I would focus on having just 1 or 2 primary links. You don't want to pepper it with a lot, but if you link out to your LinkedIn and you put a link onto, say, your GitHub, they can then explore those if they want more information. Don't rely on them only looking at those, but if they want more information, they know where to go. And for someone starting out in the career, what I'm looking for is the ability, well, actually anybody that I'm hiring, they're not going to match the skill set 100%. That just doesn't happen. Every company works in a slightly different way with a slightly different mix of technologies. Even if you go into a company and they're using, I don't know, Vue.js, they might use, and you've used Vue.js before, they might use a different build system, or they might use a different thing. So you're never going to get that 100% match. And that's probably more true with someone who has just come through college or university. So what I'm really looking for is the ability to learn and the ability to take a new skill that they have to learn and kind of learn it, not necessarily completely by themselves, but when I'm hiring someone, I'm not necessarily looking to spend all my time sitting with them, explaining everything. I want to be able to give them steer, guidance, and a bit of leadership in direction, and obviously help them out when they get stuck and point them in the right direction. But being someone who's a self-learner that can find that has a problem and then can find a solution online themselves, and then even if they come back to me and say, I found these 3 options online, they all compete with each other, which shall I use? That's so much more valuable than someone going, I don't know how to do whatever. It's like, well, it's like asking a good question on Stack Overflow. You get a lot more out of it when you've put the work in beforehand, saying, okay, I've tried this, and and it's the same when I'm hiring people. I'm looking for people who are can demonstrate that they learn, that they have a particular way of doing things. And I've gone around in circles a little bit there, but hopefully I've got across what I'm trying to say.
No, yeah, that is a really important point. And for recruiters, even if they're engineers that are recruiting, it's so hard to look at a resume or a CV and really be assured that this person actually has the skills that they're saying that they have, right?
Yeah, I see that quite often, actually. And I know the one thing that you hear many, many places is don't lie on your CV or resume, which is totally true. But I guess there are different levels of I see some CVs that are just covered in keywords. So every technology that they've ever even just read one article about. And no, it's not a lie. But it's hard to see through the soup of keywords what they can actually do. And when you have the initial phone call with them, you go through and say, oh, you've got that on your CV, and you start talking about it. And then oh yeah, well, we were kind of doing it in the office and someone over in the corner was working on it. It's like, okay, well, you don't actually know about it. So definitely put stuff on there if you've looked at it and you've got an interest in it, but do kind of be clear about that and don't mix it in with all the things that you're really good at and you've been doing for years. So you're right, trying to see through to what their actual skills are can be a challenge. And yeah, linking out to things like GitHub where you can demonstrate it, or if you've got websites that you've launched or various other bits and pieces, can be really helpful from someone trying to hire point of view.
Exactly. And looking at John's profile, like you don't need to have something that is so well formatted and like so it has so much knowledge and so many projects and everything. If you are starting out, John has a lot more experience. But it's really just to say, hey, if I put this, project that I did in ECS, whatever class, or in this coding bootcamp on my resume, and then the recruiter can actually see that on your actual GitHub and see that you did actually make those commits. It's a very transparent way of them just being reassured that, yeah, this person did actually build this project and they do know what they're talking about. And they're, like John said, they're not like lying about it or anything like that.
But equally, I think it's worth noting that not everyone has time to do that, and it's not essential. If you don't have that, you can focus on something else that you might. Maybe it is that you're on Twitter and you're sharing, relevant articles, and you're sharing things that you found interesting, or things that, oh, I've just learned this, or I've just learned that. So I think everyone has a different way of sharing or their knowledge and kind of demonstrating that they're interested in the industry, interested in different things. So I think one really important point is that what we talk about here might not suit you exactly, or might not suit your timescales, or everything you've done you want to keep private. There are other places you can kind of share your kind of love of technology and get across to the person hiring you what you're interested in.
Exactly. On that note, actually, would you mind if we start talking a little bit more about what those other platforms are, like LinkedIn, like Twitter, and how to go about building out those portfolios for yourself?
Yeah, which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with LinkedIn.
Yeah. So LinkedIn. I assume most people know what LinkedIn is, but if you're not aware of it, it's a social network for business connections. And much like Facebook, it's a mutual connection. So if you follow someone, they follow you back, and you have a feed of all of the things that you post, much like Facebook. Where it starts to deviate from that is that it is designed around a professional relationship with other people. And as such, it gives you the ability to create effectively a CV that you can put up and other people can view. If we have a look at mine, we have a header image that we can place up here. This one is actually quite uninspiring. I should probably update it. Something that I have done on my Twitter account, and we'll come back and look, is make it a bit more branded. But we'll come back to that in a minute. But again, a professional looking photo, name and job title. You can also then put in profile information about the things that you're interested in and the area that you're looking for work. There are great security features. So if you want to make parts of this only visible to people who you've connected with, then you can do. And then you can make other things public. So as we come down here, we can see, I think my profile might be slightly different because I've set it up as a slightly different way. But you get an about section where you can just write. You then get a place that you can put your work experience in, and education, any certificates that you've got or qualifications. And then we've got skills. I'm going to go back through these sections in a bit more detail in a minute, but you can kind of see how what we're doing here is building up effectively a CV. And this can be really helpful because you can find people to connect with, and then you can start conversations with them. Maybe they're in relevant companies, or maybe they just have something that is of interest to you. Recruitment agencies. Not sure how it works in the rest of the world, but in the UK, we have recruitment agencies that will help you find a job. And many of those are on LinkedIn and will contact you directly on LinkedIn as well, saying, oh, we've got this vacancy at this company. We think you'll be a really good fit. Are you interested in hearing more? So it's a good starting point for looking for a job.
We actually have a really good question on this topic, asking if it's okay or if it's possible to have like a really killer LinkedIn, but not that great of a resume.
It depends how you're applying for jobs, I would say. This is just my opinion, by the way. So it might be different in different places. I typically get applications for jobs not via LinkedIn. I go through a recruitment agency who hands me a pile of CVs. Hands me a pile of CVs. They're sent as Word documents or PDFs. So a recruitment agency, as well as helping the candidate find a job, they will work with the company to filter out CVs so that only relevant ones make it through. So just like a first pass. So that's how I get most of that. So yeah, my first impression is going to be from that CV. Now, that said, you can apply for jobs through LinkedIn. I believe when you do that, you can upload a resume and send your profile across, or you can just send your profile across. It depends how the job has been set up. Jobs, by the way, are found under this little jobs tab here, and then you can do searches and bits and pieces. So if you are applying through LinkedIn and you only have a really good LinkedIn profile, then you might get away without a decent CV or resume. But I would say that at least here in the UK, most companies will have a CV as the starting point of the process, rather than the LinkedIn profile.
Yeah,
That's
and
just my
because
experience.
yeah, I agree with that. And because resumes are such a standard like part of the interviewing process, I don't think it would look too good for you to have like a great LinkedIn and then just like a not as great resume. So I would prioritize a resume over LinkedIn, but keep LinkedIn as more of like, hey, stuff that didn't fit on my resume. You can add so many more details there. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and it's also about starting to build that network of people. So last time I was looking for a role, I asked all the people I knew on LinkedIn, just posted a message, said, I'm looking for a new role. What do people have? And that's how I found my current role, was through a connection. And they said, actually, we have some opportunities coming up soon at our place. And then I interviewed there like any other candidate, but it was through a connection. And I guess that happens more and more as your network grows. But I've so someone in my network shared they were looking for a job. I'd known them for a little while. I reshared that out to my network and said, anyone else able to help this person? So, and each of those will then click on that LinkedIn profile and get back there. So yeah, it definitely has value, but you are right about the resume and the CV. It's a standard format, and when you've got a lot to get through, you kind of want a standard format to a point.
Exactly. And just adding to the point of like connecting with people and LinkedIn being a place where people are actually reaching out to you. I wasn't really active on LinkedIn when I was initially doing my job search last year. And so it really wasn't a valuable tool. It was just like a place where I added a bunch of information. But after I started working, I was obviously a lot more active about the work that I was doing currently. And as that network grew, I started seeing like a lot of recruiters contacting me being like, hey, we have an opening for this role, you know?
Yeah, I do think that's probably one of the challenges I have with LinkedIn, is that it is primarily recruiters. Now, if you're in the job market, then that's great. If you're not, you can get a lot of random messages from recruiters all the time. But if you are looking for a job, it is a good place. And you can, on your LinkedIn profile here, there's a button that says open to, and then you can say that I'm open to finding a new job. It'll put a little badge on your image here saying looking for work. And then from that, anyone who is, I believe, marked. So the recruiters have a special type of LinkedIn account, I believe. And they get notified that you're looking for work. So it will actively promote them. Do make sure that the area you're looking for work is set correctly, so that the right people get notified, and also that you've tagged up the things that you're interested in. I keep mentioning this about making sure you've got this message about, well, the type of person you are and the type of work you're looking for. And again, here, tagging the kind of things that you're interested in. And I just want to reflect on that a little bit, because back when I started my career, I just come out of university. I didn't really have technologies that I gravitated to. I'd done a whole range of different languages, different jobs before that may not have seemed relevant. And it was like, okay, should I just take the first tech job and build my career around that technology? Or should I? And I don't know if that resonates with you as well.
Yeah, I think there's so much confusion when it comes to like knowing what the right path is. Um, do you have any advice for people facing those issues?
It's hard. It is a hard question to
Yeah.
answer it. And in some ways, there's not a right or a wrong one. Some people will say, oh, pick this technology because it's the thing. And the reality is that any technology you pick will become obsolete within a number of years. If I look at the stuff that I was doing back 10, 15 years ago, I don't do that anymore. I'm moved on to other things. And yes, at the moment, my focus is Azure and the cloud. But again, that's been in the last 5 or 6 years. And who knows, in another 5 or 6 years, it might be something else. So in some ways, it doesn't matter too much. However, you probably don't, I can't say this definitively, because the right company with the right people, and that makes a big difference. However, if a company is using a technology that is on the downward trend and they have no intention of improving that, changing it, upgrading it anytime soon, that could be a bit of a red flag. And especially if you plan on being there for a number of years, you might find yourself not getting the opportunity to learn things that are valuable in the industry. So it is worth keeping a track of the trends in the industry. And one way of doing that is the Stack Overflow question and answer site. They run insights questionnaire every year, and they publish the results. And we can see in here things about individual like programmers, how they learn, what age they are when they started coding and things. But also further down, we can see things on actual technology stack. I should have scrolled to the right bit at the beginning, but there is, that's all demographic information. There is technologies, here we go. So you can see what is popular by professional developers or everyone. You can see JavaScript is well out there at the moment. You can see trends of things that are changing and bits and pieces. We can also see a similar thing on the state of JavaScript reports. So here, a bit more focus obviously on JavaScript, but we can see what is currently being used out there in the market. So at the moment, it's mainly Angular, and that's been quite consistent. We can see what people are aware of, but where the interest and satisfaction is. So you can see that you can see the changes in the market. And I'm not saying you should kind of bet your career on any one of these, but it is definitely worth thinking about this when looking for a direction to go. When someone asks you, "Oh, you're interested in JavaScript, what frameworks? And you know a couple of different frameworks. Which one would you like to start looking for a job in?" It's worth just kind of bearing that in mind. And the same with the others. That said, you will, as I mentioned, be having to learn continuously, and that's what I like about the industry.
Yeah. And I want to add, there's also a sweet spot there between being flexible enough to kind of change and learn new things based off of the jobs you're applying to, but also still having some idea about what you want to do. When you're asked in these interviews, or even just casually, people ask you hey, what frameworks or languages are you interested in? If you kind of go into it with a mindset of, I'm able to do anything and everything, that can come off as, oh, this person doesn't really have direction, or doesn't really have a passion for anything specific. So again, there's a little bit of a balance there. I do want to make sure that we hit some of these questions that students are also asking. So one of those questions for LinkedIn specifically was, should we add notes every time we want to connect with someone?
So you don't have to, it's not mandatory. But if I've never spoken to them before, then definitely. So LinkedIn tries to suggest that you should only connect with people that you've spoken to previously. And you can get introductions through existing contacts. And that's a really good way. However, if there is a recruitment consultant that you've spoken to on the phone and you thought, okay, I'll now connect with them on LinkedIn, then it's probably not worth adding a note. But if it's someone that someone else has recommended to you, you might want to just drop a note in there going, oh, I was listening to this talk and someone recommended that I reach out to you. I guess it's just polite. If you got a message in your inbox saying connect with me from a complete stranger, then it would be a bit unusual, I guess. So personally, I would. There's no harm in it, and it's more likely that you'll connect. Don't just build a giant network of random people, though. Do try and grow your network. So connect with people that you're that you know, and get introduced to further people.
Awesome. And then another point was that the student has trouble talking about themselves in their profiles on things like LinkedIn and GitHub. Do you have any suggestions on what to put in descriptions, how to talk about yourself?
It might not come across, but I also struggle with that sometimes. That kind of self-promotion. It's do I want to put that in? Because I don't really know, I know a bit about that, but I don't feel like I'm an expert in that area. And if I put it in and people go, am I going to be questioned about it? Or is someone else that I know going to go, you don't know about that? So it can be hard. And especially at the beginning of your career when you don't necessarily have experience. I think I've got 2 tips for that. One is, firstly, leverage the experience you do have. So if you've worked in a supermarket and you've worked closely with customers, that is showing communication skills. And those communication skills are actually quite valuable. Now, you might not think it, but a lot of the soft skills are essential for doing your job. And if we can leverage those in kind of the way we write about our profile, we can sort of, I'm trying to say this now in the right way, but if you can work out what those soft skills are that are applicable to the industry that we're going to be working in, and then write about those, you'll feel more confident in them because they are something that you feel strongly about. Maybe you've been on a committee for a club, maybe a basketball club or something like that. And that again shows some skills, some leadership skills or some organizational skills. But maybe you were part of some group work that you took a particular pride in. We can use that and write that in our statement, and it's all true and it's valid, and it can help you be more confident about what you're writing, rather than go. But then also write about things in the way that makes the most sense. So say I'm actively learning this technology, or I have started looking at this, or I'm really interested in this. So even if you don't necessarily possess the skills to the level that you kind of want to kind of go, I know this, there is opportunity to kind of show a little bit.
Exactly. And if you really are struggling with kind of like knowing how to phrase things or how to structure things, something that I do is I'll just go to someone else's LinkedIn and find one like description that I really like and I think that I could replicate on my own. And I follow that example. Sorry, I'm getting a call. I follow that example. I'll change out all of the details, like don't plagiarize, but you can, get a way to make that your own. And then that way you don't have to worry about like whether this is going to look good, because it's more of like something that's already tried and tested for something else.
And another way of doing it is down in the recommendations, you can ask for recommendations from other people you've connected to. So say you have, you have worked somewhere, you can ask someone for a recommendation. And I think you'll be surprised what people are, positive things people are willing to write about you that you might not have realized in yourself. And then you can later on, if you want, use that and say, I'm people think I'm a good communicator, and you've got an example of that. So as you can see, I haven't actually asked for many people, but I do make an effort to write them when asked. So that's a good thing. On the skills, there are, I believe, ways of endorsing. So these skills here, you add them, and then people in your network say, yes, this person does know this topic or does know this. So that really helps as well. And I believe there are some skills assessments that you can do that can also help with that.
Yeah. Awesome. So if y'all have any other questions about LinkedIn, actually, there's a quick one right now. How many LinkedIn recommendations should we get in order to get hired?
I don't think it's necessarily about numbers. And that's the same thing with all of these. It's not about how many Twitter followers you've got or how many LinkedIn connections or anything like that. I don't look at numbers in order to hire people. What I'm looking for is those skills and the fact they've demonstrated the skills. The recommendations are good. As I said, it does show that someone else is willing to vouch for you effectively, which is nice. And it just adds to the overall picture. I think with all of this, it's not about one thing that's going to be the thing that gets you hired. It's about building that overall picture that you are someone who is interested in whatever and is willing to learn more about whatever and has that real drive to learn more, to go further. And when you are hiring, what you're doing, the interview process, it's two ways. As someone who is hiring, I'm looking to see what you can bring to the team. And even if you are coming in as the most junior person in the team, you'll always be bringing something to the team. And then equally, it works the other way in the interview process. You're working what you can gain from the company, and it's got to work both ways. And in order to answer that question of what you can bring to the team, it's about understanding that bigger picture. LinkedIn is part of that, well, a way of showing part of that. GitHub is, blogs are, Twitter is. It all just forms part of that picture. And if you don't have one bit of that, it doesn't matter. You can still see the picture. You don't need every puzzle piece. And everyone's puzzle is going to look different. So,
yeah. I like to think of LinkedIn more of like a job search tool. So yeah, you don't need to have more than 500 connections, but the more people you do have, the more eyes you have on your LinkedIn, the higher like your chances are, basically, right?
Yeah. And you can follow companies and people on LinkedIn without connecting with them. So if you have an interest in, say, Microsoft technology, you can go and follow the Microsoft organization. And that all appears on your profile as well, interests here. So again, and there are groups as well. And it just, again, builds on that picture. And it doesn't take anything to do that, really. But it's, I guess maybe that's the one takeaway message, really. It's all about, all of this is coming together to build a picture of what type of person you are, what sort of thing you're looking for, and what you can bring to the organization you're applying for.
Exactly. And now pivoting a little bit to the third area, which is resumes and CVs. And we don't have to dive too deep into like exactly what it should look like, because we spoke briefly about how it's like a regional thing, right? A resume in the UK can be completely different to one in America and completely different to one in any other country. I think one point of confusion that a lot of people have is, what is the difference? Like, why are they called two different things? When are we using these two different tools?
So mine, I primarily see CVs. I've seen a number of resumes, but it's primarily CVs. The purpose of both of them is to be able to explain your past work experience, normally in reference to a particular job. Now, my understanding between the two is that a resume will tend to be one side of A4, one bit of paper, and tends to be very factual, very much focusing on your education and your work experience. A CV typically covers 2 pages and has a bit more content to it, as it covers more pages. That extra content can be a range of things. I like in the CVs to see a nice opening statement or a paragraph, much like we've talked about with these others, but really just setting out who you are and what you're looking for. So an example one might be something like, I'm a recent graduate of a computer science degree looking for roles to further my love of JavaScript, or something like that. Maybe that's not the best example, but you get the idea, because if I've got a load of CVs, I can read one line at the top that kind of hooks me in. On a CV, I'll also then see a list of skills that the person has, so I can quickly match those against the skills that I'm hiring for. I'll then see work history, and in that work history, I'll often see examples of what people have done in that role. So I led this project, or I learned this new technology. And then you get a bit about education, and again, you can see that. Whereas CV differs from a resume, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you might also see interests in there. So if you are a member of a football team, or you volunteer somewhere, you might see some of that kind of information in a CV that you might not typically get on a resume. And then on some CVs, you used to get references, so the names of people they can contact for further information. I personally don't include that. Mainly because if someone wants that information, they can ask for it. It doesn't help form that bigger picture. It's kind of another step on. And as you've only got 2 pages on a CV, ideally 2 pages, you want as much space to kind of shout about the skills and things you've done. One thing I would say is that on the earlier CVs, so ones for more junior roles where people don't have experience, there is a lot more when I've written them, it's been more soft skills. So like you might break it up and say, okay, I've got communication skills and these are where I've demonstrated it. I've got I don't know, leadership skills. These are where I've demonstrated it, referring back to university courses and various bits and pieces, or as I said, shop work and things, or anything that might be relevant. And education obviously takes up a larger section of your CV. As time goes on, you have more roles, they take up more space, and the education shrinks down because it becomes less relevant. So CVs have that flexibility depending what role you're applying for.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say for more US-based jobs, from what I've seen, they might not even ask for a CV. They would directly just ask for your resume and optionally ask you to upload a cover letter, which is more of like a full letter version of what a CV might include. But I'd say there's so many different takes on a cover letter that could be a whole entire workshop on its own.
Yeah, I do tend, so some people say customize your CV or resume for every job. When you're applying to a lot of jobs, that can be a lot of work. So creating a generic one, as long as they're all in the same kind of tech stack and things, use your covering letter to differentiate them. Research the company, and if it is something like you're really interested in, if you're interested in sport, and then you I'm going to apply to a sports company, write that in your covering letter and get the people engaged that way.
Exactly. And then I do also want to get a chance to touch on Twitter and blogs and all of these other tools that are available, but people might not necessarily think of at all as a recruitment tool.
Yeah, so Twitter, as I said, I mainly use Twitter to learn about things that are going on in the tech industry. So I follow, if you're not aware of Twitter, it's slightly different than things like Facebook in the regards to you follow people and it's a one-way connection. You follow them and they then appear in your feed and you see anything that the people you follow post. As simple as that. If you like it, you can like it, or you can share it with the people that follow you. So it is a really good way of finding more people in your industry, especially if you're looking at a niche. So I can click on this person here, and you can see from this, you can see their profile, and you can see who they're following. I think where's that button? So you can see their tweets and things that they've recently done. You see a little profile of them. And here you go, following. So you can go here and you can see who they follow. So you can start to build up a set of people that you follow. And you might, oh, actually, that person also has a bio that's similar to the things I'm interested in. I'll also follow them. So you can build this list of followers and you can learn about things that are going on in the industry. And as you do that, people may follow you back, and any messages you share will then be shared on theirs. So over time, if you're sharing interesting and relevant content, then that can be a place where you gain a number of followers. And in turn, when you want to start looking for a job, you can say, I'm looking for a job. And then people will see that in their feed, and then they can retweet it out to their followers. And you can get a really big network effect in that. It is something that takes time to build, but it is, even if you just use it just to follow people, you can find roles and jobs that way. You can also search in here using hashtags. So you can search dev jobs, for example, in that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say the final bit. So to make it all work well for you, I would definitely recommend uploading a graphic at the top, an image, making sure your profile picture is relevant. As I said, it doesn't have to be your face if you don't want to be so public, but make it consistent. And then a small intro. As you can see, I've been on Twitter quite some time, but yeah, it takes time to build it up. It's probably only the last year that I've made more of an effort on Twitter when I started looking for a role. So yeah, and feel free to follow me. And yeah,
I think we'll share your Twitter in the comments as well. important point on things like Twitters and having blogs and things, that they're great places to cross post. So if you're building all these projects on GitHub, you don't know what to tweet about, you should tweet about the projects that you're building, right? Someone will see that and someone might like it and go and star your repo, or, you know, reach out to you and see if they can help you improve on your code. There's so many ways in which you can connect with people there. If you're writing a lot of blogs, you can post about what blog content you're writing about, and you might find some interest over there as well. But also, it's not required. It's more of this idea that recruiters aren't actively looking for your Twitter, but if they happen to find it and it's public and it's like all like really bad stuff, then it might not work in your favor.
Yeah, and you can pin posts as well. So if you've got there's a particular blog post that really kind of shows the kind of things that I work on. It's a blog post I wrote on my blog. Then it really the pinning the post really works. But I'm very conscious about what I tweet and what I retweet. I think it's very easy to get caught up in political debates or things that might not necessarily like with LinkedIn. It's obvious it's professional, and that's a professional forum, and the articles that are shared on there are professional. When it gets to Twitter, it's a little bit more of a Wild West out there, and you know it's up to you what you tweet and what you like and everything else. But for me, I try and keep my Twitter account linked to my work profile, and therefore I'm very conscious about those kind of things. It's just something to think about, and maybe you could even have 2 Twitter accounts if you really wanted to keep your work profile separate from your personal one. But just something to be conscious of, I would, because remember, this is all public.
Exactly. And then I'd say let's just dive into some of the questions that students have on a more general level. So do you think personal websites are a significant advantage in the recruiting landscape? And what are some aspects of those websites that would be most useful?
So depending on the types of roles, you sometimes get portfolio websites. So if you're focusing more on the UI aspects, the front-end engineering, graphic design, that side of things, a portfolio website is, I believe, it's not an area that I work in a lot, but I believe it's a bigger component. When it comes to technology, probably less so. I use mine to just really share something I've learned, and there is always something that can be shared, no matter how experienced or inexperienced you are. Even if it's you're learning this new thing, write about it. Someone else might be learning it in the future. You might even end up Googling something and ending up back on your own website because you forgot about it. So it's a place to put your findings and learnings. If you're not sure about setting up your own website for blog posts, you can use Dev2. Dev2 is a really good website which allows you to post blog posts and articles. It's also got a community around it, so they will actively share it on your behalf. So if you're not sure, it's a good place to kind of get started with low investment. Obviously, your own website takes a bit more uptake and maintenance. Going back to the original question about how does it fit into the recruitment side of things, I don't think it's with the exception of, say, a front end and kind of graphic design side of things, I don't think it's a huge impact, but it's, again, about building that bigger picture.
Yeah. Would you actually mind going back to your personal website? I don't think we were screen sharing at the time.
So in mine, I put a quick statement to say who I am, what I do. I've actually linked that out to an About Me page if people are more interested. And then these are just individual blog posts about things I've been learning about. So this 2 approaches to dynamically generating images with Azure Functions was based on work that we were doing around generating stuff. So yeah, there's some of them, it's just links out to other bits and pieces. So, but that said, I've only done this in the last 2 years. I mean, I've been a software engineer now for a number of them and never felt the need to do it. So I don't think it's particularly impacted me either way, but it can add as another thing, but I wouldn't say it's definitely not essential. And again, if you're not posting up code samples on GitHub, but you prefer to write long form, then maybe a blog's for you, but maybe not.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned this already, but if you are going into design or front end, definitely something that would really help, improve your portfolio. But if you're going into like artificial intelligence and machine learning, maybe not, it's good to have, but I don't think any recruiter is expecting it.
What it helped me with was when I was doing interviews, I could start talking about something. They get really interested. I go, actually, I've already written about this in a blog post, and I shared the link to them. They then went and read away. Oh, he really does know about this because there's a long thing. So it might be similar with people looking for new roles. You've learned something. You've written out what process and how you went about learning it. And you can refer people to that when they say, oh, well, do you know React? And you're like, well, actually, I spent a month building a website and I documented the process. And as I say, you don't have to build your own website for that. Things like Dev2 are a great platform, which you can do that. Or you can just write a blog post in Markdown and put it on GitHub.
Exactly. And if you're not sure about where to start or what to write about, I know John gave us a lot of options. You can just pick any project that you've ever worked on in a class, even in college or in a boot camp or however you're learning. If you're self-taught, whatever project you're building to self-teach, and just write about it, right? No one actually cares about the project. They care about the fact that you put the time to learn it, you completed the project, and that you're able to communicate that you did it.
Yeah, because they're skills you're going to be using in your job on a day-to-day basis. It's definitely, it's a rare scenario that you're a developer on your own, sat in a room, not talking to anybody. Collaboration is a key part of it.
Exactly. Another question is, how do I promote my portfolio to companies?
So I think the key thing is to put it onto your resume. So you don't want to pepper your resume or CV with lots and lots of links, but as long as there's one or two that is a place to go where they can find the other links. So maybe, put your LinkedIn or your GitHub, and then when they go to that, they can then see the other things. If it is your portfolio that you're most proud of, put that on, and inside your portfolio, link off to your LinkedIn. So choose your best landing page and put it on your resume, because that's the first thing they're going to see.
Exactly. We also briefly touched on this already, but should I add details about non-tech related jobs?
I definitely would, especially early on in your career. Obviously, once you've got a couple of tech jobs under your belt, then they become less relevant. But yeah, it's that you'd be surprised the skills that you've learned in those other jobs that you can carry across. Obviously, don't make them the focus of your CV or resume, but do put them on there. If you feel there's something that you've learned, some skill that you could bring or use. Also, you don't know necessarily what type of companies you're applying to. I've worked for gym companies, for example, and if as a software engineer, but if years before I'd happened to work at a gym company, as a fitness instructor or something like that isn't directly relevant, it is to that company that you're applying to. So you never quite know.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And then the last question is, any advice to intern students that would like to break into the software engineering field?
Breaking the first couple of years is the hardest. Getting that first job, because a lot of things look for experience, and even the most junior jobs say, "Oh, with so many years experience," and that's really hard to get over that first hurdle. All I would say really is that you've demonstrated. It's about that bigger picture and that story that we just keep going back to, making sure that you're showing that best side, that you are that kind of person who is self-driven, that is able to pick something up and continue to learn it. And because going into any job, you're going to have a lot to learn. So if you can show and demonstrate that, and if you have got portfolio pieces, if you have done, say you're a member of a club and you do them a website, or you do some voluntary work that's related around technology, all of that adds to the picture.
Exactly. Well, that's it in terms of the questions that we have. John, is there anything else that you wanted to mention that we haven't touched on today?
I guess the only last thing is, don't underestimate any of your public profiles. So if you are answering questions on Stack Overflow or asking questions, that's all part of that bigger picture. So I see CVs and that have links to Stack Overflow where people have just asked questions, and that to me is just as important because it's part of that bigger picture. So yeah, that's the only one that we haven't really spoken about. But I think the overarching message is help build that picture to make it easy for the person hiring to understand what you're about, what you can do, what you can't yet do but would like to do, and that's that kind of thing.
Yeah. One good place to start is John is in our Discord. He's our mentor. So you should definitely hit him up, tag him in some comments in the Discord channels, ask him any follow-up questions that you have about this workshop or anything else that you want to talk to him about. And then once you have that conversation going, connect with him on LinkedIn. And there you go. You have a new connection.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. This was very, very productive. And I think we got a lot of really good advice and things that I didn't even know about. So I really appreciate you kind of joining us today. If you want to talk to John, he did share his Twitter, and we'll share those links again on Discord afterwards. But yeah, thank you so much.
Great. It was fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks then. Bye.